welcome to another episode of the LEI'D Back Life podcast, where we're talking about loving life, entrepreneurship, and improving daily. I'm Jordan Ostroff, and today we have a awesome guest. We've got Russell Knight here. Russell has a family law firm in Chicago and some stuff in Naples as well. Probably the most published family law attorney in the country, with over 700 law review style articles with citations and everything. And I'm super excited because we are going to talk about basically becoming no longer anxious with work by really learning everything. Did I frame that correctly?
That's exactly right. I think I've stumbled on figuring out how to be a good lawyer, and then there's only so many laws, there's only so many cases, and being a lawyer is not like being, an airplane, pilot where you have to do 400 hours or whatever. Like what we do is we read books, and you can just crack the book open, and until you know it, and we all know it when we know it, and once you know it, those issues aren't really issues anymore. So I could talk about how I came to that and sort of stumbled into it, and it also became the marketing that I do. So that's sort of let me go back in time, like to maybe 2015, and I had two young kids. I was married at the time, and I had a little divorce law practice. It was me and like two paralegals. And did I know what I was doing? Not all the time. But I wanted to find a cheap way to market myself, and I wanted to get better at what I was doing. And so I committed myself to obsessively trying to write an article about any issue that came up. Like, can you lock the doors in a house if you're getting divorced? You can't, but why can't you? Like these most family law attorneys are like, oh yeah, it's sort of homespun wisdom by anecdote that you can't lock the doors. Well, why can't you? Because the guy's on the deed. And if you have a deed, you have an absolute right to get into the house. And unless there's an order contrary to that, you can't do that. And so I looked it up. It wasn't enough for me to say, I know this, and I even know a little why. I looked it up. I cut and pasted the law from a case law for the most part, and then put it in from case law descriptions so that if I ever had to come back, I could just cut and paste it and put it into a motion. Well, I was doing that about once a week in 2016 and 2017 and 2018, to where I had a couple hundred articles. And then COVID happens in 2020. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm sitting at home, and the phone wasn't ringing for the first 3 months because, if we all recall, like nobody did anything. And so I wrote like two articles a day, and I started working through, instead of problems I was encountering, things that are like fundamental building blocks, like how do you lay foundation for an exhibit? What is a sua sponte order exactly? What is, I spent, I think I spent like an 8 hour day doing how do you value a business? And, it's a 7,000 page article. And so I kept doing that throughout the course of the pandemic, and then religiously reading every appeals decision since 2020. I've read every civil appellate decision. And then I, cut and paste dribs and drabs. It might be a case about, reinsurance, but it has forum nonconvenience stuff that is important. And then I put it into a forum nonconvenience article. And I've been doing that. And now most of the work I do is actually updating old articles with new tidbits from new case law. And I can confidently say that I kind of know everything about Illinois family law, to the point where I'm writing articles about stuff that are barely family law related. Like I think my last one was, what if you have a fiduciary duty claim? Like what if two people are in business together and they're also married, they also have fiduciary duty claims. So how can you invoke those fiduciary duty claims at the same time that you're invoking family law stuff? So I'm running out of things to research, which means like probably have hit the end of the road. The articles now are cumulatively longer than the Bible, so I feel very comfortable knowing that. And then the plus side, besides knowing all this stuff, is I don't have the Sunday scaries anymore. I don't wonder like, oh, maybe my opposing counsel is going to pull X, Y, or Z on me, or the judge is going to say, well, what about this counsel? Because what about it? I'm the guy who knows. Like, and what's more, because I've largely published and advertised the fact that I do know this stuff, everybody else knows that I know this stuff too, to the point where, kind of flattering, I was in court once and, waiting for my turn to go up at like 10:15, and the 10 o'clock call was happening. And the guy up in front of the judge was like, well, Russell's here. Why don't we just ask him? It's very flattering, but the biggest advantage to it beyond like it expanding my business is that I like work more. I like life a lot more because I'm not like, well, what do I do? I know what to do for everything. And it's super rare. And frankly, at this point in my life, it's exciting when there's something that I don't know what to do. Uh, Somebody had an NDA the other day, and I'm like, oh, that's so exciting. I wonder what the legal standard for that is in discovery and a divorce. So it sort of turned my attitude around about law, where I used to suffer from a lot of anxiety and, wanting to do a good job to the point where now that just doesn't happen. I know it all, and I love fielding questions from other people, especially my staff or like colleagues. And it's sort of I'm 46. I would anticipate I'll work at least another 20 years, and I hope I can just keep this smooth level of total knowledge. And I guess if I was, I'm not Jewish, but if I was, I'd be a yeshiva student or something. I would love to know like everything about one thing, you
There
know.
we go.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to go deeper in this transition, but it's interesting because so last week we had Ron Payne on, and Ron, we were talking through, and this is, don't get me wrong, this is not Ron and I being the gurus. This is us being walking through this as well. Like parenting children as your privilege changes, as you get a more successful firm, like how do you keep your kids grounded with, those of us raised with that really hard work ethic. And so it's interesting, like the transition over time, because for you, you're talking about this like anxious Sunday scaries transitioning to where you are now. So take me back to the beginning of that time when when you were concerned you didn't know everything. Like, what did you feel? What were you going through? What was that like?
Well, you kind of feel like a fraud. Like people pay you hundreds of dollars an hour to ostensibly walk them through a tragedy as a divorce lawyer, and you should be, in theory, prepared for anything. And in 2014, I had taken the bar, 7 years before, and I knew my way around the courthouse and I knew like the statutes and the fundamentals, but there were times when, judges would be like, well, what about in regarding marriage of snow? And I'd be like, I have no idea what they're talking about. And now I do. So it's during those times, it was just like kind of terrible. You wake up and I would call it like the 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. panic attack, where we'd all be in the Daily Center, the world's largest courthouses in the middle of Chicago. And it's got 31 floors, and each floor has uh 20, no, it has uh 12, it has 12 courtrooms in it. So there's
Wow.
30 times 12, 360 courtrooms. You're running all over the place, and there's other people there. And when you're a young lawyer, you always feel like you don't really know what you're doing, and you feel silly in your cheap suit because you're young and you're cheap, and you hope that you're going through the motions correctly. And then once it's over, you're like, did that even go well? Well, I don't know. I got to go back to the office and see what happened, see if somebody else filed something. So it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, if I'm being honest.
But was there a specific event that was the impetus for you to make this commitment to getting all the knowledge, or was it just this like existential lawyerly dread?
It was totally the second option. It was the
Okay.
existential lawyerly dread where I'm like, I cannot live like this where I'm faking it my entire life. I had to say, I want to know the why behind some of these basic rules. Most divorce lawyers accumulate this sort of like folk wisdom of like child support doesn't really work that way, or this doesn't really happen that way. But I'm like, why? Someone must have discussed it at a previous time. And if you like turn on your LexisNexis or your Google or what have you, you can usually find case law, which is actually like when you get into it, it's a fascinating system. Someone else has dealt with it. They explain what the rule is, why the rule's that way, and if they're any good, you can usually just cut and paste it. And that's what I do. I cut and paste and then say, this is the rule. So be careful. And then I give some advice like, so be careful about doing this. There's also a sub rule. Here it is. And then now I'm at the point where I just read obsessively the case law that comes out. It usually takes about 2.5 hours every Saturday morning. And then I plug in the case law that I find into my existing articles. And the truth is, uh, I can, I'm going to use a chatbot now that turned all my articles into a vertical LLM,
Gotcha.
because I don't remember all this stuff. Like who remembers everything? So I'm like, oh, I'm pretty sure I discussed that in this article. And then my, like one of my associates calls me Russellpedia. Because like she's like, "What? Where can I find information about this?" I'm like, "I'll just text you the link to the article I wrote."
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, so like my wife will give me the well, but the chatbot comes up with things that are incorrect. I'm like, yeah, but so do humans at a much higher rate. So it like yes, confirm it. Don't take it as gospel. But it's fascinating. Like when you started making this journey though, were how did you know like what to learn and read up on first?
Oh, I mean, there's basics, but the truth was is like if I was dealing with something, or if a client asked me like, I don't want my, what if I went into a coma while I'm in the middle of this divorce? Would my husband have an automatic power of attorney? And I would like block 2 hours off and be like, she's probably right. Let's find out what the answer to that is. And then I did, and then I wrote a little article about it. And like once you do that, 10 times, you're like, well, I kind of feel good because I know this little area. And then once you do it 100 times, you're like, I think I'm getting really good. Just like anything. I guess people do Sudoku puzzles and you can get harder Sudokus. It's,
Right.
it's kind of, for me, it was kind of the same thing. In fact, it is my, some people do the New York Times crossword puzzle. I read all the articles and it's intellectually challenging and then it's really fun too. And then it totally relieves the anxiety associated with the job because there's not a problem where I don't have not only a viable solution, but a solution I can reference with the specific case law. Otherwise, most people they're just guessing.
Well, and the interest so from a scientific level, there's completely the like the brain will remember better when you are trying to reteach, regurgitate,
Yes,
recreate. So I love that. And then also like there that first article, that first thing that you were looking into, like the basic level that you had it at, there's millions of people that need that level, let alone now, you putting together hundreds and hundreds of articles and updating them. There's people that are also at that level wanting that more scholarly put togetherness. So like no matter how simplistic of the writing, like you are addressing a need for somebody else who has the same question.
that's exactly right. And so now, because of the internet, it's just out there, and then people can search it. I don't know. I guess like people would write those, gigantic tomes that we would read in law school, like something on torts or somewhat was McChesney on evidence or whatever the guy's name was. And like people would do that. Like every lawyer has the capacity to basically do their own horn book about what they're doing because you're doing it anyways. Like
Right.
if you're writing, and the average lawyer is probably writing like 50 different motions a year about different subjects that they have to do some bare minimum research on. Like, why not turn that into 50 articles about what they're up to and something that they know, and then they can essentially advertise that I know how to do this because I have done it in the past. But you know how lawyers are. We always have a fire we have to put out. So
Well, and usually it's self-created.
yeah, yeah, no kidding.
So as you continue this journey from day one researching that issue up to now, like when did you start to know this was working as helpful for you, helpful for marketing, helpful for your brain space?
Almost immediately, almost
Okay.
immediately. I would say I think one time when we were just at 60 articles and people were commenting when they called saying I read this. And then now we get like sounds silly, but like we still get people like, oh, I would read one article. We get some people who are like, man, I read them all. And now like I goes, this is and they're like, I'm really talking to Russell Knight. I'm like, yeah, I'm just a guy. Like I I do all the sales calls, like I do the most of the consults. Um, just talk to me. Tell me what your problem is. And they're like, well, I read that you wrote this. And I'll be like, yeah, I did, but I also wrote this. And then sometimes I'll be like, I can't remember everything I wrote. Like, take it easy.
There we go. Yeah, I remember. So when I first started my firm, it was Jordan Law because no one was going to remember my last name. And like third phone calls, like I'm talking to the Jordan, and I was like, "Yeah, man, $150 to file the name and $20 to a buddy to make a logo and sharing space from somebody else." Like, the Jordan. At
Yeah,
least, at least you were getting credit for specific, wonderful brain power.
yeah. So, anyway, that's like it's made my life a lot easier because that's I don't have that existential dread, which lawyers are notorious for having, without a doubt. Because there's not a way to understand that you're sort of at the end. It's like imagine for the person, if anyone's not a lawyer, imagine if like someone's like, "Oh, could you get to the end of the internet?" No, you
Right.
couldn't. But and could you get to the end of law? No, you couldn't. But could you get to the end of one niche area of law?
In
Maybe.
one state, in one
In one state,
area.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe. Like, and I wouldn't say you know it absolutely, but you could get close. And then at that point, you provide really good advice and really good predictive power about what's going to happen. And without a doubt, the the ease of being in court. But I like to say this, like people imagine going to court like they're doing like they have to bring in like homework. They're used to homework. They're like, oh, here you go, judge. Like, here's my homework. And the reality of it is the judge doesn't want your homework to get turned in. The judge wants you to tell them about the homework, but the judge also lets another kid in class stand up and yell at you while you're telling them about the homework.
That's,
And so
that's a great analogy.
so people like freak out, justifiably so. But when you really have all that stuff in your frontal cortex, oh boy, it's so fun because like the other side, they can't even follow along sometimes. You're talking about uh, well, I'm bringing that in for the purpose of impeachment, and we weren't even talking about that the first time. Then it's here, definitely hearsay, Judge. I don't want to object too much, but like we know how the rules work here. And then you're kind of winking at the judge, and the judge is like, "That's right." Well, then they ask the other side, "Would you like to make an offer of proof?" And they're like, "Whoa." Um, so it's those things where the art of what we do, you can't get to the art of what litigation is until you have these fundamentals stuffed into your brain. And that is, and anyone who like really loves the litigation understands how like you have to be completely authentic, you have to be persuasive, that the juries and judges really care about the lawyer. They don't care as much about the people behind the facts. That's what's persuasive is the lawyer. And when you can do that with so freely and be authentic because all the little details, the thousands of rules that all interlock are effectively in your brain. One, it's like it's super effective, but two, it is so much fun, so much fun.
Well, and what's more persuasive than walking in there where the judge knows that you know this better than anybody else in the room? Like that is the
Yeah,
ultimate difference.
yeah, but you can't say that.
Well, I mean, listen, you can't say that you took the judge out fishing, but like from the
Yeah,
standpoint of if the judge is like, oh, Mr. Knight, I read your article on this,
yeah,
6 months ago before I was looking to get me prepped for these briefs, and then be like, oh, and then it's your brief, like that's
yeah.
just a wild situation.
Things like that happen all the time. I've had people print out my articles and use them as exhibits against me.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Too funny. All right, so I want to take a pause for a second. So this month we've got our ultimate sales process and our making a marketing plan package on sale. So instead of it being 500 each, it's 500 for both. So Russell had touched on how this was great marketing for him. So if you're struggling on marketing your firm or your business, this might be a good place to start. It's a 20-page document that takes you through that, and then ultimately the sales process to convert that interest into work. I wanted to go into the marketing side of the impact you've seen with this. But before that, is there anything else you want to touch just from like the emotionalness of?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I rhapsodized about it enough.
All right. So talk to me marketing wise.
The marketing kind of does itself because it's out there. Like I've literally had opposing parties say to my clients, "What did you do? Just hire the guy who shows up on Google first." And Google does look at people who read. There used to be a thing called Google Brain before October 2023, a day that will live in infamy. October 2024, a month that will live in infamy because Google changed its algorithm. So it would
Uh,
be the top number one on everything because Google Brain would watch how long people interacted with the website. And so
yeah.
reading something that's a little bit complicated and long like mine, most articles are 1,500 to 3,000 words. It was enough to keep people on my page way more than any competitor. And so I would always be number one. Now my feeling is that AI is going to plagiarize from myself and other people and create like blurbs that are enough for most people, and it's just going to push us further and further down the search links. So I'm not I'm trepidatious about what I think is going to be the future of marketing. But for right now, I hope that AI will be like, this guy wrote 700 articles, like he must know what he's talking about, and that maybe getting 10 super lawyer awards in a row doesn't really equate into being knowledgeable on a subject. Nothing against super lawyers; they're super, but I'm
And they're lawyers.
yeah, I'm just hoping the AI can sort of recognize that in the long term, which I expect it to. Because if you do, for example, Chat GPT used to do citations of
Yeah,
sound information, and it always cited me. And so we don't know what AI is going to end up looking like, if AI is going to be completely independent and just say, this is this, and I'm positive of it, or if it's going to say, this is this, and this is where I got the information from. It seems to me a lot more logical that it's going to say, this is this, and this is where I got the information from. Because sooner or later, somebody's going to sue uh, ChatGPT for practicing law. for
sure.
Yeah.
Well, and my thing is like, I totally get what you're where you're coming from the longer time on the page reading stuff. Ultimately, I think AI is just that TikTok, like how can we get people information as quickly as possible? But at the same time, like Google wants to give them the answer they want. So is the answer that they're looking for the answer to this question, or is the answer they're looking for what lawyer is going to help me solve this situation? And to the extent that it's the second one, it'd be really cool if the AI was like, hey, that answer you liked from me was actually from Russell. Like, just call him to be your lawyer. Like, that would be a really cool
Yeah, but they want to get
thing to
paid
see, I
off of it.
think.
Yeah, they want to get paid off it, which I don't blame them. I mean, it's a business. So I'm trepidatious. It's made me probably millions of dollars. But everything's evolving. Like if I had the same idea in 1980, it would have sold me like 20 books. Like it wouldn't have worked out. So now I have this idea that worked out in the 2000s and 2010s rather. And so now I'm 2020s. How's it going to get impacted by AI? It may double, or it may totally make it amazing, or it may cause problems. I would suggest to everybody, lawyers watching out there, to be on your tiptoes. Someone told me that what's old will be new again, and we'll all be doing brand marketing, just like the old days where you'd pay for the back of the telephone book and you'd buy a billboard, because that's with just being in front of people was the only way to really get their attention. And
Right.
in the age of AI, that may be the reality again. I don't know.
Well, I also think the like to the extent that AI is coming for lawyers, it's coming for the transactional side first.
Yeah, you're right about
The
that.
litigation stuff, I think, is a longer timeline for us to trust a robot to argue in real time for us in court. And so, obviously, like where you're positioning yourself from a family law standpoint, like is a litigation. You know, when push comes to shove, litigating the case, you're positioning yourself in a pretty good spot. So,
I don't know. Try
regardless,
DeepSeek, man. That comes up with really good arguments.
well, yeah, but like yes. However, are we going to sit there in court and have a judge like read the one side's deep seek? You know, like there's going to be a human element of the litigation, limited for some period of time, whatever. And so, like, I think that's an interesting place versus positioning yourself like I don't know, estate planning, trademark, patent, that kind of stuff. Like, I
Yeah,
think that's the one where people are going to take forms a lot sooner than sitting
they
next
are
to them in court.
they are the canaries in the coal mine. I used to practice bankruptcy law, and like I don't understand why that can't be done. Uh, that way it couldn't have been done by software alone 10 years ago, let alone now.
Makes sense. Well, and then, it's interesting you mentioned like the 2.5 hours on Saturday to catch up on the case law. But like, I'm thinking, how cool is that to remove the dread of 40, 50, 60 hours of work, not knowing you're certain, and then the waking up late at night, early in the mornings, in a cold sweat over it? Like, as much as that's a decent amount of time, it seems like it's a great investment in your mindset.
Yeah, but if you're doing that 2.5 hours for 50 weeks, and then you do that for 10 years, like that's 10,000 hours. And good luck to your competitor who's like he's going to try to catch up. I mean, I want everybody to know this stuff, but I don't know, we all have lives, and people ask me like, where do you find time for this? And it's really just because I got in this habit of doing it. I have
Right.
2 kids. I have a life like everybody else, but I do this religiously, just like other people work out. I work out too, but or they have, or just people sit around and watch TV. They watch the same show every week, like to try
Yeah, I
to.
know the last time I saw the numbers, it was like the average American's watching 5 hours a day of TV, which maybe it's less because the average 19-year-old spending 10 hours a day on TikTok. But, it's amazing to me the amount of time that we'll spend in front of a screen.
Case in point.
Well, I to me, listen, this is human contact, right? Just through facilitated from Orlando to Chicago. All right, so I want to talk this. You guys are watching this on Tuesday, March 19th. This Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, you'll get my newsletter. This one is for those of you with children in that 4 to 7 range. Nighttime is the right time to fight crime, or at least to conquer the next day. So a little PJ Masks throwback, but the newsletter will be about like nighttime routine and ultimately that wonderful thing that allowing us all to sleep so we can wake up well rested and how to do it. So I hope you guys will check that out on Friday. So coming back to this, Russell, it's interesting. Like you've built this stuff. We talked a little bit about the AI from the future of this, but from like a right now standpoint, explain to me how like where you're at has allowed you. You mentioned your life is so much better now than it was 10 years ago. Like walk me through that part of it.
Well, for one, I don't do like a ton of the law work. I basically act like as a consultant to my own business because I hire people, and one of the reasons why they work for me is they want to get better. So if you want to get better, you can't lean into the guy who's like just a super businessman. There's lots of people out there like that, and they do wonderful work. But I really have the capacity to answer just about any question. And so I hope that they don't get the Sunday scaries either. They just I'll just call Russell and ask what to do. And so because I don't have to do that work, I like employing other attorneys as a multiplier. I make money off of them, and they make money off of my capacity to bring in work and my capacity to consult, so they know they're never over their heads, so long as they're asking me the right questions or asking me any questions for that matter. So it's been, and we've crafted like a really nice atmosphere of people who legitimately, everyone wants to get better and be a better lawyer. And it is the highlight of my professional career, without a doubt, when to take people and see how they get better over the years. I have one associate that's been with me straight out of law school, and she's in her fourth year. Tremendous attorney, unbelievable. And uh, but like maybe the first year was a little rocky, and the amount of improvement is uh that's like the most value that I like get on a personal level from anything in my career, is to see somebody else's career, like to see that her now, like she's married, and I hope she has a big family and all that other stuff, and that I if I had any part of making that happen for her own personal life, I'd feel very proud.
So I'm interested. I love what you talked about from a leverage standpoint, right? Like you having this wealth of knowledge you can leverage across building everybody up across the size of the people. But do you think that you're attracting candidates for work who want that, like who want to be the best attorney? Okay.
Yes, I absolutely assure you. It's a two, there's a two, a one, because I have a Naples office. I get people who have a fantasy of living in Florida, and I can make it happen for sure. But and also like that they want to be with somebody that like is uh like passionate about the fundamentals of the work, because they're in the fundamentals. I think when the head of the organization is strictly business and has divorced themselves or has only gotten so far because they've it's very tempting to become just good at the business and then become sort of mercenary about it. I think that leaves a lot on the table as far as leadership goes, because if you it's not an I think I would feel weird if I was in a business, and even if I worked for the world's greatest business strategist and business guy who's able to bring in the greatest cases. But if I had a moment where I'm like, oh man, I have to take this case to trial, and like, how do I do this? And if he told me like, hey, you're the lawyer, just look it up. It's kind of why I don't think that, private equity is really going to ever have a big foothold in law. I just I don't see how you could be a fearless leader without knowing how to make the donuts, if you will.
Well, but I think you have so like if private equity came in and made a deal with you in some manner, I think it allows you to expand that much more, to have that much impact, to oversee that many more people. Like I think there's an amplifier component, certainly more than a replacement component.
Maybe. Um, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Um, in Arizona, like we'll find out.
To me, it's fascinating because I want to go even farther than what you said. I think there's a lot of people that don't want to be great. They want to be good, or they're happy being good enough. And so I think, right off the bat, like your reputation is probably scaring away some people that just want to like punch the clock.
That's fine. They can work for someone else.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Like I think there are even, you talked about the people that are great at business but don't know how to do the legal work. But I think there's plenty of people that are just okay or good enough at any of those things. It's even finding somebody that wants to be the best at the intake process, to be the best at the CEO role, to be the best at
Yeah,
whatever. I think
maybe.
that's few and far between.
Maybe like when you don't know how great a really good paralegal is until you have a really good paralegal. And as a lawyer, you're like, it's, you realize it's a completely different job. It's not a junior lawyer. And then you're right. Like I encourage people to want to be the best. Um, and I guess if you have an atmosphere where you're trying to be the best and it's not just like, well, let's just try to get through this. That's not, I wouldn't want to work at a place like that. So
Yeah. Well, and so like I always tell people, to me, your culture is your internal brand, your brand is your external culture. And so like I think from what you've identified, there's this really awesome, like you have positioned yourself as the most knowledgeable, most published person as an external brand, but also internally that's attracting the culture of people that want to be the best themselves. And that, I mean, that alignment has to make things so much better.
yeah, it's amazing. I never would have imagined this. If you had told me that this is what would have happened, I would have just shrugged my shoulders and been like, I guess. I kind of stumbled into it, but trying to make the most out of yourself, whether personally or professionally, is clearly what we're on this planet for.
Is that the advice? Like, what's the advice? Is that the advice that you give to
Yeah, you're
the?
showing up at work to just do your best job, do your best, do like the 10% extra. Um, we've all been there with work where people like they get a thrill out of like ripping the boss off or somebody else off. Like, oh, I cut out early, or like I took a smoke break. Like this is or I stole a soda. Like I was a kid working at like fast food places, and like we all knew those people. Like you probably would have had a better time to say I was, I got the grill clean. I worked a wait. There was this station. I made sure everything was done properly. The pride of doing something will always exceed the pride of doing something properly will always exceed whatever thrill you get out of like by cheating the system. And so that's the advice I give to people in whatever career they took. And the same thing for law. Like you can fake your way the entire way through this if you wanted to. We all know people who do.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because like you get the research into what is it, the job, the career, the calling. And I think so many people hear that and they're like, oh, well, like certain jobs are calling jobs. But then you look at the numbers behind it, and like you've got that janitor at the hospital who it's a calling because they know that like they're keeping things clean to save lives so that there's not,
Mhm.
fewer germs that will kill somebody. Like I think all of us have the opportunity to either build our situation up to a calling or demean it down to a job, regardless of what the job actually is.
I once hired an exterminator, and I was like, what do I know about exterminators? And so I interviewed all these guys, and all the people who were like from a corporate place were like, we could do this for this and this. The guy I hired, he looked me in the eye and said, you are looking at someone who loves his job. He loves catching raccoons. And I was like, this is the guy.
That's my guy. I'm imagining him doing like the Mr. Burns, like you are talking to somebody that loves what I do.
He really does. I mean, he took care of the problem. I'll tell you that.
So, is it? I want to phrase this question the right way. Like, are there people who are lawyers who are never going to feel that way about their job? And if so, what should they do? Or is everybody capable of finding that niche in the niche in the niche?
I don't know.
Okay.
I wish I did. But I don't. I definitely was somebody who like I didn't really care and I did a bunch of, random work and I thought I could like was just trying to make a buck. Uh and then I got the niche and a niche and a niche. But like obviously if that's what everyone could do, everyone probably would do that, but they just don't.
If everyone could do what, they would do that.
Could do like could niche down or be some
Oh,
like super business person. That's not how people are. Like there's a reason why the Flintstones is about a guy who there's a reason that the Jetsons is about the guy who just comes in and presses the button, and it's not about the guy who owns Cogswell Cogs that ran the factory. Like people, the average person wants to be Fred Flintstone and clock out at 5 p.m. and not the guy, Mr. Slate, who ran the quarry. Like that's what people relate to. There's no show where it's about the boss. The show is always about the King of Queens, the driver guy, or whatever else.
that's that's fascinating. That's yeah, I guess.
Yeah, like the show's about Homer. It's not about Mr. Burns.
Right. Well, and like even The West Wing isn't about the president. In fact, there's, I mean, I guess they've rotated all the cast, and that's an old show at this point. But like, yeah, that's true. I wonder why that is. That says something about us as a society.
Yeah, but what's weird is like if you read a book, a book will be about a book will be about Alexander the Great, and it won't be about all the other people, or a book will be about Napoleon. Um, but there's just the medium of just the person who'd rather sit and just have the information flow over them, like is for TV because it's a cool medium. Is that's about the bystanders of life, whereas books are about the active people in life, which probably tells you if you want to be an active person in life, you should probably be reading a lot more books and watching a lot less TV.
You're preaching to the choir, man. I did 169 books for last year, so
Wow.
I mean, I still watch TV. Don't get me wrong, but it is it's true because like I always talk about it from a knowledge standpoint. Like I like my frameworks, my foundations, my big picture stuff from books, and then like I love Instagram reels for like this is what's happening on this social media platform this week. This is this one little thing that we had, this one little update here. Like I like those for that standpoint. But it's really fascinating. You talk about it from the standpoint of the focus of the story being different across the mediums. How do we help more people though craft the right story of their own life?
I don't know. Um, I guess you kind of have to be the hero of your own life and imagine that like you have complete agency over yourself. I think we've all been in the situation where like you feel like you don't have agency over yourself, and it's usually kind of a dark and scary place. It at least happens to all of us when we're kids. Um, and then today, as we're adults, like the best example is probably just working out. Anybody who's, been on a health journey, like your body changes so immediately with any level of discipline over a period of time. Everything else is analogous to that.
Yeah, so we're recording this at the end of January. You guys will listen to this at the in the middle of March. So at the beginning of this year, my wife was like, "Hey, I want to do 75 medium," and I was like, "All right, I'll support you." So I've been doing a decent amount of working out, but like from a not any different than I was doing before. From the
Mhm.
food standpoint, I cut out fried food, I cut out cheese, and I cut out bread, and I'm down 20 pounds in
Oh my
29
God.
days. But like,
Wow.
but it goes, thank you. But it goes to show you how terrible I was doing before. Like for that to have such an impact, like there was clearly a bunch wrong at the front end to have that much of a difference over cutting out those three or four things.
Yeah, that's wild. Well, congratulations.
Thanks, man. I'm hoping to keep it going. All right, so let me talk about our next guest, and then we'll wrap up. Next week, we're gonna have Andy Herrick on. Andy's the co-founder, the founder and co-owner of Untied Business Solutions, a bookkeeping and fractional CFO firm. She's a really big systems person, and so I sent Andy this message couple weeks ago, and I was like, "Hey, I'm a curiosity. What would be like the top 5 most important systems you think somebody would need to live a great life?" And Andy had a phenomenal answer that I'm not going to tell any of you. You're going to have to come back next week and get this answer. I will give you the one hint that part of it's meta, part of it is the system, but after that, there's some pretty specific stuff. So, super excited to see you all back at this week. But Russell, I'm curious, like, what as we get towards the end, anything else you want to make sure that we cover?
Um, I will tell you that if you're getting like to get your priorities straight, you have to have a system. And the one that I use is Getting Things Done by David Allen. And I've been
Yeah.
doing it since law school. And it will change my life. I would recommend other people check it out.
It is amazing to me the tickler system of the days, the months across the year. Like,
It eliminates anxiety. Again, if you're an anxious person, you have control. You've complete control over what you're dealing with. You just have to get it organized.
and I'm gonna do a throwback to your super lawyers thing. So for all of us that see all those wonderful awards at the point that somebody else is getting them, the David Allen tickler system is great to do. Like, oh, nominations are next February, next November, whatever, and like put it on your calendar to start, reminding your friends, nominating people, whatever it is. Like it is amazing what does he call it? The mind like water, right? Like when you know that you have the information at a place that you will get to it when you need it, you don't worry about it until that time comes where it comes up that you can do something about it.
It's amazing.
I love it. All right, cool. So for anybody smart enough to want more of your insight, read some of the articles, send some family law business in Florida or Chicago to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Probably email me at Russell, Russell, at RDK, R as in Russell, D as in dog, K as in night, legal.com.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Russell, for being with us. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened. We'll see you back here next week for Andy's episode. In the meantime, I hope you all are living that laid back life.
Thank you. Take care.